Caleb Reed was arguing over a freight bill when the homeless woman on the depot bench said, "That wagon number is on there twice." The clerk stopped talking. Caleb turned. The woman sat beside one worn carpetbag with a small black slate in her hands. Her coat was clean, but thin at the elbows. Dust marked the hem of her skirt. The freight clerk frowned. "Ma'am, this doesn't concern you. It concerns him if you charge him twice." Caleb looked back at the bill. 2 lines carried the same wagon number. He had been ready to pay. The clerk pulled the paper closer. Probably copied wrong. "Then, the total is wrong too," the woman said. A couple of teamsters near the door turned their heads. The clerk's face tightened. "You looking for trouble?" "No, just arithmetic." Caleb held out his hand for the bill. "Figure it again." This time the total came out $11.40 lower. That was more than Caleb paid a ranch hand for a week. He counted out the corrected amount and looked toward the bench. The woman had already returned to her slate. "You work freight?" he asked. "Used to." "Where?" "Cheyenne, then Laramie." The clerk gave a short laugh. "She's been sitting there since yesterday. No room, no address, no job. You want advice, Reed? Get it from somebody who owns more than a carpetbag." The woman's eyes lowered. Caleb looked at the clerk. "Seems she just saved me $11. That doesn't make her respectable." "No," Caleb said. "It makes her right." A telegraph key ticked behind the partition. He turned back to her. "What's your name?" "Nora Mercer. I'm Caleb Reed. Reed Ranch, 12 miles west. I know the place." "How?" "Your cattle shipments come through here." Caleb studied her. For 3 years, Reed Ranch had bled money in ways he could not explain. Feed cost more. Freight cost more. Cattle sold for less. His former partner had once handled the books. Then the man disappeared with 6 months of payroll money. Since then, Caleb handled everything himself. Badly, if he was honest. "You looking for work?" Nora's chin lifted. "What kind?" "Accounts, 6 weeks. Doing what?" "Sorting invoices. Sale receipts. Freight feed payroll pay. $8 a week. Meals included. There's an unused cookhouse behind the main cabin. Separate quarters. Hours, sun up to supper. Sundays yours. If I ended early, I pay the week." Nora watched him a moment. Then she picked up her carpetbag. "I'll need paper. I've got paper. Good ink. I've got ink. Then I'll come." "No thanks. No relief. Just terms accepted." Caleb found he preferred it. By noon, Nora was behind the small desk in the Reed Ranch office, while Caleb stood near the door regretting the arrangement. The room had 1 window, 2 chairs, a warped filing cabinet, and paper stacked wherever it would stay. Nora opened the first account book, then another. She looked at Caleb. "Who arranged these?" "I did. They're not arranged. I know where things are." She held up a feed receipt. "Where does this go?" Caleb pointed toward a shelf. She pulled down a tobacco tin. He said nothing. Nora set the receipt on the desk. "All right." "What?" "Nothing. That sounded like something." It was arithmetic. He left before she could see him smile. For 4 days, Nora worked through the ranch records without asking for sympathy or conversation. She ate with Caleb and foreman Eli Boone at the kitchen table. She asked direct questions. How many calves survived spring? Which supplier delivered oats in March? Why did a rail charge appear twice in June? Eli disliked her questions. "Cattle ain't columns," he said one evening. "No," Nora answered. "But men who buy them use columns." Eli scratched a mark into his tally stick. "I know what a healthy steer looks like. I believe you." He eyed her. "That all? That's why I need your numbers." Caleb watched Eli lose the argument without realizing it. On the 5th morning, Nora placed 2 feed invoices on Caleb's desk. You paid these. I can see that. You paid them twice. Same delivery date. Same wagon. Different invoice numbers. Caleb checked the entries. Nora was right again. How much? $28 over 3 deliveries. His mouth hardened. That supplier's been selling to us 8 years. Then he's had plenty of time to learn you don't check him. Caleb looked at her. She did not soften the sentence. He took the short chain from inside his vest, removed the office key, and set it on the desk. Nora glanced at it. You won't need me unlocking the room every morning. For the first time since arriving, she seemed unsure. She picked up the key. I'll keep it here. That's what keys are for. Their eyes held 1 second too long. Caleb stepped away first. That afternoon, Nora began studying cattle receipts, not bills. Weights. She asked Eli for his old head counts. He brought them reluctantly. She asked how the cattle had looked before each drive. Mostly good. How good? Good enough I'd have bought 'em. By sunset, the office wall held 3 columns in chalk. Head count. Expected weight. Paid weight. Caleb came in and stopped. What's that? Your cattle. My cattle aren't on that wall. The missing part of them is. Nora placed 3 old Vane stockyard tickets beneath Eli's tallies. 1 shipment had gone through autumn rain. 1 during a dry September. 1 after a short easy drive. Different years. Different herd sizes. Different conditions. She tapped the final figures. The losses should move. Caleb frowned. They do move. Not enough. Nora took her black slate from her pocket and worked the figures again. Then again. The room grew darker around them. Finally, she wrote 1 line beneath the numbers and turned the slate toward him. Caleb read it. The cattle ARE not losing this weight. Outside, a steer struck the corral rail. Caleb looked from the slate to the old sale tickets. Then back to Nora. What are you saying? She closed her fingers around the chalk. I'm saying somebody is. Caleb did not answer Nora at once. He picked up one of the old Vane stockyard tickets and carried it closer to the lamp. Cattle lose weight on a drive. I know. They lose more in heat. I know. They lose more if they bunch hard or go too long without water. I know that too. His eyes lifted from the paper. Then what are you saying? Nora turned back to the wall. I'm saying the loss should change. She pointed to the first shipment. Wet autumn, short drive. Then the second, dry September, longer road. Then the third, cool weather, smaller herd. Her finger moved down the paid weights, different conditions, almost the same percentage gone. Eli Boone stood in the doorway with his hat pushed back. He had been listening. You can't weigh a steer with chalk. Nora looked at him. No. She handed him one of his old tally sticks. That's why I need someone who knows cattle. Eli took it. You trying to sweet-talk me? No, good. He came inside. For the next hour, Nora asked him about shipments going back 4 years. Which herd had been heavy? Which had been thin? Which had been held overnight before leaving Reed Ranch? Which had walked straight through? Eli remembered more than Caleb expected. Those red steers in '84 were heavy, Eli said. Too heavy, maybe. Caleb's father liked them broad. Nora found the corresponding sale ticket. The paid weight was low. Eli leaned closer. That ain't right. Caleb looked at him. You sure? I loaded those cattle. Eli tapped the ticket with one rough finger. They didn't leave here that light. Nora added another chalk mark to the wall. For the first time, Eli did not complain about the arithmetic. Over the next week, the office changed. Nora sorted invoices into clean bundles. Sale slips went by year. Feed accounts went by supplier. Freight charges went by route. And the wall kept filling. Caleb came in at dawn before chores, and again after dark. Sometimes Nora was already there. Sometimes she was still there when he returned. She never asked him whether she was doing well. She simply kept finding things. One night, Caleb found her seated on the floor beside an open wooden chest. Old account books surrounded her. The office key lay beside her knee. He stopped in the doorway. That chest was locked. "I know. You used my key. You gave me your key. That's not the same thing." Nora looked up. It either opens the office, or it doesn't. Caleb stepped inside. The chest held records from the years when Luke Fenner had been his partner. Caleb had avoided them since Luke disappeared with the payroll money. Nora reached for another ledger. Caleb's hand came down on the lid. "That's enough." She looked at his hand, then at him. "I need those." "No." "Why?" "Because I said no." Nora rose slowly. "You hired me to find where the ranch money went. I know where that money went." "Do you?" His face hardened. "My partner stole it. Some of it." Caleb took one step toward her. "You don't know what happened." "No, because you won't let me look." The room went still. From the bunkhouse came the faint scrape of somebody moving a chair. Caleb lowered his voice. "You think because you found a few crooked feed bills you understand this place?" "No." Nora's voice stayed level. "I think you hired me because you don't." That landed harder than he expected. She took the office key from the floor and placed it on the desk. "If you want somebody to copy numbers and agree with you, find somebody else." Caleb stared at the key. "You quitting?" "I'm giving you the choice you keep pretending you don't have." He looked at the chest. For 3 years he had told himself the worst mistake he ever made was trusting Luke Fenner. It was simpler that way. Trust man. Lose money. Never trust again. Nora stood waiting, not pleading, not apologizing. Caleb pulled the chest fully open. "Finish the figures." She looked at him. He pushed the key back toward her. "Finish them." Nora picked it up. Neither said anything more. 3 nights later, she found the first clean break in the pattern. Caleb was outside when she called for him. Not loudly. That worried him more. He entered the office with Eli behind him. Nora had laid 4 sale tickets in a row. "This one," she said. Caleb leaned over. It was from 6 years earlier, before Silas Vane controlled most of the livestock buying around Red Butte. "What about it?" "Your cattle were weighed at the railroad platform." "So?" "Look at the average." Caleb did. Then she placed a Vane stockyard ticket from the next year beside it. Same ranch. Similar season. Comparable herd. The difference was sharp. Eli bent low over both papers. "That ain't shrink." Nora shook her head. "No." She added 2 more years. The same thing happened. Before Vane dominated the local yard, Reed cattle sold at weights that matched Eli's memory and the ranch's feed records. Afterward, the numbers dropped. Not wildly, just enough. Enough to hurt, not enough to look impossible. Caleb straightened. "You're accusing Silas Vane of cheating every rancher who sells through him. I'm saying his numbers deserve checking. You know what happens if you're wrong? Yes, he can close his pens to us. Yes, he can tell every buyer from here to Cheyenne that Reed cattle are trouble. Yes, and you still want me to walk into his yard and call him a thief?" "No." Nora's answer came hard. "I want proof before we call him anything." Caleb paced once across the office. "We don't have proof. Then we make some." He stopped. Nora pulled another paper from the pile. "The railroad still has a certified platform scale." Eli nodded slowly. "For freight. It weighs wagons too? Anything heavy enough to matter." Nora looked at Caleb. "Then we weigh the same cattle twice." He understood before she finished. Railroad first, then Vane's yard. Same herd, same day. Eli rubbed a hand over his beard. "If his scale is honest, The numbers will be close. Nora nodded. And if they're not? Nobody answered. Outside, the wind pushed against the office wall. The final fall herd was nearly ready. If Caleb sold it, Reed Ranch could buy winter feed and make payroll. If he challenged Vane and lost access to the market, he might enter winter with cattle he could not afford to keep. Caleb looked at Nora's wall. Years of numbers stared back at him. Then he looked at the office key beside her black slate. He reached inside his vest and removed the empty chain where that key had once hung. He placed the chain on the desk. All right. Nora waited. Caleb nodded toward the figures. We've got one herd left. I know. If we do this, we use that shipment. I know. He looked directly at her. Tell me exactly what you need. Nora's plan needed 3 things Caleb could not afford to waste: time, cattle, and trust. The final fall herd would leave Reed Ranch before sunrise. By noon, if everything went right, the cattle would stand first on the railroad's certified freight platform and then on Silas Vane's private livestock scale. Same animals, same day, same head count, no feeding between measurements, no watering between measurements, no excuses. Eli Boone listened with his arms crossed. You're forgetting shrink. I'm allowing for it. How much? Enough to be honest. Nora had already written the acceptable difference on her slate. She turned it toward him. Eli studied the figure. That's tight. So is Vane's pattern. Caleb stood beside the office window. You sure the railroad will weigh livestock for us? They'll weigh freight if the fee is paid. That isn't an answer. It's the only one I have. Caleb looked toward the corrals. 112 steers waited beyond the fence. That herd was winter money. Payroll money. Feed money. If Silas Vane refused to buy after Caleb challenged his operation, Reed Ranch would enter December with a herd it could not cheaply carry, and little cash left. Nora watched him doing the arithmetic without paper. You can still stop this. Caleb turned. You want me to? No, then don't offer. I'm reminding you it's your ranch. He almost corrected her. Then stopped. That was the point. It had always been his ranch. His decisions, his keys, his mistakes. Tomorrow, he said. Eli nodded. Nora wiped the slate clean except for one number. The percentage Reed Ranch had been losing. They started before dawn. The cattle moved under a cold sky with Caleb at the front, Eli riding flank and 2 ranch hands behind. Nora drove the supply wagon. She had asked to ride. Eli had told her she could either help keep the paperwork dry or spend 6 hours discovering why cattle drives and skirts were poor companions. She chose the wagon. By the time Red Butte appeared, frost had melted from the grass. Smoke from the locomotives hung low over the rail yard. Caleb led the herd away from Vane's stock pens and toward the freight platform. A railroad clerk stepped from the office. What are you doing? Buying a weight, Caleb said. The clerk looked at the cattle. Stockyard's over there. I know. You selling to Vane? Maybe. The clerk's eyes moved from Caleb to Nora. Nora already had the fee counted. We need a certified gross livestock weight and written ticket. The man rubbed his chin. Platform wasn't built for arguments. Good, Nora said. We only need it for weighing. 10 minutes later, the first group entered the broad platform pen. The balance beam shifted. Iron weights moved. Nora stood close enough to read the measurement herself, but far enough not to interfere. Eli counted heads twice. Then the next group went on. And the next. When the final total was written, Nora checked the arithmetic, then checked it again. Caleb waited beside her. Well? She handed him the card. He looked at the total. For several seconds he said nothing. The number was higher than the figures Silas Vane's past transactions had taught him to expect. Much higher. Eli leaned over his shoulder. I told you those cattle were carrying good weight. Caleb folded the card once. What if Vane's number matches? Then I was wrong. Nora's voice held steady. And if it doesn't? She looked toward the stockyard. Then we stopped guessing. Silas Vane was waiting when Reed cattle reached his pens. He stood beside the sale shed in a dark coat, silver watch chain crossing his vest. 2 other ranchers were unloading nearby. Vane smiled. Reed thought maybe you'd missed the season. Not yet. Vane's eyes moved to Nora. Still keeping a clerk? Still paying one. Expensive habit. She's saved me more than she costs. That removed some of Vane's smile. His yardman opened the gate. Bring them through. Nora stepped forward. After the wait, we'll need a duplicate ticket. Vane looked at her. You'll get the usual paperwork. We need the scale reading before the sale agreement is signed. The yard went quieter. Vane tapped the blank weight ticket twice against his thumbnail. My yard weighs cattle after contract. Then today can be different. His eyes shifted to Caleb. You letting hired help negotiate your cattle now? Caleb said. She asked for a weight. She doesn't own the herd. No, Caleb held his gaze. I do. Vane tucked the ticket into his coat, then sign your sale contract. Nora looked at Caleb. He knew exactly what signing meant. Once he accepted Vane's terms, arguing about the scale afterward would become a fight over a completed sale. Vane placed the contract on the outdoor desk. Good price today. Caleb looked at it. It was good. Better than Vane had offered Reed Ranch in 2 years. Too good. You changed the number. Market changed. Since yesterday? Vane smiled faintly. Markets move. Nora stepped away from the desk. Caleb noticed. She was doing what she had promised. No pleading, no grabbing his sleeve, no asking him to prove anything to her. His ranch, his choice. Silas lowered his voice. Come inside, Reed. Caleb followed him into the sale shed. Vane closed the door. You've got winter coming. I know what you owe for feed. Caleb said nothing. I'll buy the whole herd at the price on that paper. Before weighing them. I know Reed cattle. Vane leaned against the desk. I'll also remove your yard fees from last spring. Caleb looked at him. That generous? Call it business. What do you want? Vane's eyes went toward the wall separating them from Nora. Send the woman home. Caleb's face changed. Vane continued. She's filling your head with numbers she doesn't understand. She understands them fine. Then let her understand them somewhere else. He pushed the contract closer. Preferred access next year. No waiting behind larger outfits. Better commission. You walk out of here with your winter covered. And your scale? My scale is my business. There it was. Not proof, but close enough to smell. Caleb pushed the contract back. No. Vane stared at him. Think, I did. You're risking your ranch for a woman you met 6 weeks ago. I'm risking it on numbers you don't want weighed. Vane's expression flattened. Then get your cattle off my property. Caleb walked outside. Nora read the answer in his face. He refused? He refused the scale. Vane stepped out behind him. Reed cattle are not being accepted today. Several ranchers turned. One of them, Owen Marks, stood beside a pen of longhorn crosses. What happened? Private business, Vane said. Nora raised the railroad card. No, it isn't. Vane's eyes sharpened. Caleb moved beside her. Nora spoke to the ranchers, not loudly. Reed cattle were weighed on the certified railroad platform less than an hour ago. Mister, Vane will not weigh the same herd before Caleb signs the sale. Owen frowned. Why not? Vane said. Because this woman doesn't know livestock trade. Nora nodded. Then prove it. Silence. One rancher stopped unloading. Then, another. Eli stepped beside the reed gate. Weigh them. Vane looked around and understood what refusal was beginning to cost him. Fine. He pointed toward the central pen. Bring them in. The Reed cattle entered Vane's scale enclosure. The iron beam moved. Weights slid into place. Nora watched every motion. The yard clerk wrote the result and handed the ticket to Vane. Vane looked at it first. Then Caleb. Then Nora. He passed it over. Nora placed Vane's ticket beside the railroad card. The difference was not small. It was not transport shrink. It was nearly the same missing percentage she had written on the office wall. Behind them, Owen Marks stepped away from his own cattle. He stared at the two cards, then at Vane's scale. Weigh mine again. Another rancher spoke from the next pen. Mine too. For 10 seconds, nobody moved. Then, Owen Marks walked to Silas Vane's scale pen and opened the gate himself. My cattle go next. Vane stepped in front of him. They go nowhere until I say so. Owen looked past him toward the railroad platform. Then I'll weigh them over there. Another rancher unhooked his loading rope. So will I. The change spread without shouting. Men who had spent years accepting whatever number Vane handed them began backing cattle away from his pens. Vane turned on Caleb. You started this. Caleb shook his head. No, your scale did. Nora stood beside the outdoor desk with both Reed weight tickets in her hands. She did not wave them. She did not accuse Vane of every bad sale in Wyoming. She simply placed the cards side by side. Same cattle, she said. Same morning. Same head count. The railroad ticket showed one weight. Vane's showed thousands of pounds less. Vane pointed toward the cattle. Shrink Eli Boone gave a dry laugh. In 40 minutes, Vane ignored him. Your woman's made a spectacle out of ordinary business. Nora looked at Caleb. He saw the old habit rising in himself. Take control, push forward, handle it alone. Instead, he stepped aside. Nora, she understood. This part was hers. She looked toward Owen Marks. Would you allow the same test? Owen nodded. His cattle went first to the railroad platform. The certified weight was recorded. Then, with half the stockyard watching, the herd entered Vane's scale pen. The beam settled. The second ticket came back lower. Far lower. Not identical to Caleb's difference, but close enough. The yard went silent again. A rancher named Tom Avery spat into the dust. You've weighed my cattle 6 years. Vane's face tightened. You people are listening to a homeless clerk who doesn't know the first thing about livestock. Nora looked at him. I don't need to know what they eat. She tapped the two cards. I need to know the same cattle cannot lose this much weight walking across a yard. A locomotive whistle cut through the air. The railroad freight superintendent came down the platform steps. He was a thick-set man named Harris Pike, who cared less about cattle than about schedules. What is holding my loading line? 3 ranchers started speaking at once. Pike raised one hand. Caleb handed him the 4 tickets. 2 certified railroad measurements. 2 from Vane's private scale. Pike read them slowly. Then again. Your yard scale tied to my shipping pens? He asked Vane. It's privately operated. Didn't ask who owns it. Vane's mouth thinned. Yes, Pike handed the tickets back. Then, nobody loads through that scale until it's inspected. You can't do that. I can keep disputed weights off railroad paperwork. Pike turned to his foreman. Close the livestock gate. The iron gate slammed shut. That sound ended Silas Vane's control faster than any threat could have. The ranchers began talking among themselves. Not about whether Nora was respectable. Not about where she slept 6 weeks ago. About pounds. Money. Years of sale tickets. A buyer from Casper who had been waiting for another shipment walked toward Owen Marks. If your cattle are certified on the railroad platform, I'll bid on them. Another buyer spoke to Tom Avery. Within minutes, the thing Vane had protected for years began breaking apart. Choice. The ranchers suddenly had it. Vane walked straight toward Caleb. One last offer. Caleb said nothing. I'll take your entire herd at the railroad weight." That got Eli's attention. Vane continued, "Full market price. No yard fees. Cash draft today." Caleb looked at him. "What's the condition?" Vane's eyes went toward Nora. "You take your clerk and leave." Nora's face did not change. Caleb almost smiled. Silas still did not understand. "You think this is about getting one fair sale. It's about keeping your ranch." "No." Caleb looked toward the men moving their cattle away from Vane's pens. "It's about knowing the weight before somebody tells you what you're worth." He turned to the Casper buyer. "You still buying?" "If the railroad ticket's clean." "It is." The negotiation took 20 minutes. Caleb did not receive a miracle price. He received a fair one. That was enough. When the final amount was written, Nora checked it twice. Eli checked the head count. Caleb signed. For the first time in years, Reed Ranch sold cattle and received what the herd had actually earned. They rode home after dark. Nobody spoke much. The wagon wheels rattled over frozen ground. At the ranch office, Caleb lit the lamp. Nora went directly to the missing pounds board. She began adding the fair sale. Caleb watched her. "What does it say?" She worked another figure. Then turned. "You weren't failing." He looked at the board. "You sure?" "Some years were bad." She pointed to feed costs, drought losses, and freight expenses. "But not like you believed." She touched the column containing Vane's weights. This made ordinary bad years look ruinous. Caleb sat down. For 3 years, he had treated every problem as proof that he had trusted once, and paid for it forever. His former partner had stolen from him. Silas Vane had cheated him. Those things were true. Another thing was true too. Nora had been right, because he had finally allowed someone else to see what he could not. He removed the empty keychain from his vest. "I spent years thinking protecting this place meant holding every key myself." Nora leaned against the desk. "And?" "I nearly locked myself inside with the mistakes." She looked toward the board. "What happens now?" Caleb stood. "Winter feed gets paid. Good, payroll gets paid. Better, and I want you staying." Nora became very still. "As bookkeeper?" "No." Caleb walked to the desk. "I can hire another bookkeeper." Her eyebrow lifted. "That sounds foolish." "Probably," he almost smiled. "I'm asking you to help run it." She said nothing. "Sales, accounts, contracts, decisions. Your decisions?" "Ours." Nora looked toward the office key. "You're offering me a partnership?" "I'm offering you a place where your name goes on the work." She studied him. "And if I disagree with you?" "You already do." "That isn't an answer." Caleb held out his hand. "Then, disagree and stay." This time Nora smiled before she took it. Months later, the first spring cattle stepped onto Reed Ranch's new certified platform scale. Morning light spread across the corrals. Nora watched the balance settle. 1,072. Caleb chalked the figure onto the board. Nora leaned closer. "You wrote 77. He looked. "So I did." Across the top of the board were 2 names, Caleb Reed and Nora Mercer. Caleb handed her the chalk. Nora corrected the digit. Then, she stepped aside as the next steer walked onto the platform. Caleb read the beam. Nora wrote the number. And together they kept weighing what was theirs. If Caleb and Nora's hard-earned second chance stayed with you, subscribe and like for more Wild West stories.